You guys know it's been a long time since I've done a Bulls hot takes video, and with the Bulls getting some time off between games, I figure what better time than any to react to your guys' hot takes, see where your head's at regarding this season, and I have to say we've got a lot of depressed and pessimistic Bulls fans out there, to say the least. Man, I thought I was being negative and down about this team, but let's dive into some of these takes. Also, real quick, if you guys are getting tired of just listening to Bulls content all the time, I do have an NBA channel called And1 Hoops if you'd like to check it out for some variety. I'll leave a link to the channel in the description. We're about to hit 5,000 subscribers over there, so I'll be doing a 5K giveaway, so if you want to get in, then do it now. Also, this channel just hit 31,000 subscribers. That was a nice surprise to wake up to. Really appreciate the support from all of you guys. It does really mean a great deal to me, and I'll make sure to keep the content coming all season long, so subscribe if you haven't already. But anyway, let's get into these takes. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Our first take comes to us from, I guess it's Iona7190. Acme makes no trades this season. Vooch walks in free agency. Lonzo doesn't return this year. Bulls fall just outside of the play-in and give a top 10 pick to Orlando. I'm pessimistic. Yeah, you got that right, my man. Come on, have a little faith. I'll tell you where I agree and disagree. First, regarding Acme not making any trades this season, I would be shocked if Arturas and Mark Eversley don't make any moves whatsoever prior to the trade deadline. There is just no way, based on the current state of this team, that they wouldn't even make at least one trade. To just sit there, twiddle their thumbs, and stand pat when this team clearly needs to make adjustments, that would be a fireable offense. Not saying that they're going to get fired, because I do think they'll do at least something, but as far as Vooch walking in free agency, I'm 50-50 on this one, because I do think there is some likelihood that the Bulls try and make a trade for him by the deadline, or at a minimum try to work out a sign-and trade of some sort going into the offseason rather than just letting him walk for nothing. And who knows, maybe Vooch balls out and they decide to extend him even for beyond this season. But at the same time, I do see a scenario in which he walks for nothing in free agency just to be able to free up that cap space rather than trying to execute a sign and trade. Lonzo not returning this season, I mean, yeah, I've already resigned myself to the fact that he's likely not going to return this year. It's just not trending in the right direction, which is really unfortunate because the Bulls really don't have any time to lose with DeMar and Vucevic at their ages. And then the Bulls falling just outside of the play-in. No, I mean, I know the Bulls don't look good right now. But I do think as their schedule lightens up a bit, they're going to start stringing together some wins and will ultimately make the playoffs. I don't see them getting beyond the first round, but they're not going to be shipping a top 10 pick to the Magic. Next, we've got Doug LOL 1943. Bulls should trade Drummond, Portland's first round pick, for Jakob Poeltl. Well, first, the salaries wouldn't work as Drummond is making too little for that kind of money to make the trade work for Jakob Poeltl. Second, as much as I'm sure the Bulls would be all over it, especially considering it's a lottery protected pick, and it's possible the Blazers might not even make the playoffs this season, which would mean the pick would not convey this year and could continue to be extended into future seasons, but there is no way the Spurs would take this. Poeltl's value is much higher than that, and they can likely get more for him, at least a first round pick that isn't as heavily as protected, and another young role player, not an aging veteran like Drummond, who doesn't even fit their timeline for rebuilding. Next, we've got Mars Winnington. The Bulls will trade one of their big three before season's end. I still think this is unlikely just because the Bulls have preached so much about continuity, even though continuity, that factor, hasn't really paid off for them so far, and the three of those guys, when they've actually been out on the court, have been a net negative. But if one of the big three was traded, it's likely going to be Vucevic. First, because I did see a report somewhere, not sure how credible it is, but that the Bulls front office have said DeMar and Zach are untouchable in a trade. Not saying I agree with that if it is in fact true. Really, if the Bulls keep playing like they have been, everyone should be considered for a trade if it's the right price. But if any one of the big three were to get moved before the end of the season, it's going to be Vucevic because he's on an expiring deal. They have to decide if they want to keep him around long term. If the decision is they don't want him around long term, then yeah, you might as well try to make a trade while he still has some value rather than just letting him walk for nothing in free agency. Next, we've got G0414. The Bulls need to experiment with Dalen Terry since we don't have a solidified rotation already. I don't know if I would even consider this a hot take because, yeah, I think it's a valid point. At this point, you need to be pulling out all of the stops and experimenting with different rotations, which Billy Donovan has started doing, by the way, by changing up the starting lineup. He's been playing Derrick Jones Jr. at the 5 more as well, and I also think you just need a scrappy young player who plays with a high level of energy. The Bulls need an energizer out there. You don't really have that right now and guys on the court, so yeah, I would love to see Terry get some minutes. Not saying he should be getting heavy minutes, but even just between 5 to 10 minutes to see what he can do and see if he helps out the Bulls in any way. Next, we've got Ramirez Manuel 117. Bulls can trade away the big three and still contend for a serious playoff run. Yeah, I don't see how that's possible because let's say the Bulls do in fact trade all 3 of those guys, which again won't happen, but if they did, they're likely going to do it in the form of a rebuild where they just try to acquire as many picks and young players to get the most value. They're not going to exchange them for similar type veteran players. If you're blowing up the roster, stacking picks for a fresh start, yeah, you're not going to be a good team. In fact, you're going to be a pretty bad team. Like, as much as Bulls fans want to criticize the play of the big 3 as of late, they're still our best players. They make up about 75 to 80% of the Bulls' total scoring. Like the Bulls would be a very bad team without these 3. It'll be good for the development of guys like Pat and Io, but yeah, they wouldn't be good. Next, we've got Clips God 1503, a hot take, but not really. Zach is overrated by Bulls fans, and so is Lonzo. I mean, it depends on who you ask, because I feel a lot of Bulls fans are actually always talking about how overrated Zach is, especially after getting that max contract, and are way overcritical of him as a result because of that max contract. For me personally, I mean, you guys know my stance on Zach, and I'm obviously one of the more critical ones of him, and was wary of the Bulls giving him a max contract, but at the same time, I do also recognize he's one of the best scorers in the NBA. But yes, there probably are some Bulls fans who probably do overrate Zach as this superstar level player, when in reality, he's just not on that level. And if Zach was playing for a different team, they probably wouldn't think anything of him. I mean, we're all going to have our biases when it comes to players on our team. I mean, as for Lonzo, I guess if you base it on the fact that he hasn't been available, and sure, he's overrated, but when he's healthy, he by no means is an overrated player. He's a great basketball player and really was the glue that kept the team together and made them so much fun to watch last season. I guess if you're basing it off of the hype surrounding him coming into the NBA because he was a member of the Ball family, maybe a little overrated because I don't see him becoming a future superstar or Hall of Famer like his father proclaimed him to be, then sure, but in general, I would not consider him to be overrated. Next, we've got Ricky Davila. The Bulls don't blow it up, but trade 2 of their big 3 for another star. I mean, trading 2 of their big 3 is kind of blowing it up, I guess, unless you consider blowing it up, hitting the reset button and going full tank in rebuild mode, which in this instance, if we're trading for another star player, I guess it wouldn't be a full-on blow up, but I just don't see how the Bulls would be able to move 2 of them to get another star. The most likely trade candidates, if it was 2 of the 3, would be DeMar DeRozan and Vucevic because of their age and contracts ending sooner than Lavine's, but I'm not really sure what other star or disgruntled star player you could even get for those 2. I know some have been saying, well, trade DeMar and Vucevic for Kevin Durant, but the Nets aren't going to go for that. They know they could get way more for Kevin Durant, and it would have to include picks, which the Bulls just don't have. And by that point, you're running the risk of giving up too much for KD if you're talking about multiple first-round picks, as well as DeMar and Vuce at his age and taking on his contract, which, you know, the Nets are going to be paying him big money going into his late 30s. Next, we've got Max Goldstein. Bulls should trade DeMar. He's on a friendly contract, which gives him value. Although he's playing well, his ISO ball and mid-range shooting isn't the future identity of this team, or it shouldn't be if we want to win. You know, as much as it's not going to happen, I really can't envision a world where the Bulls trade DeMar. But honestly, if we're talking about trading any of the big 3, it's DeMar that makes the most sense, and it's for the reasons you just mentioned. He, in my opinion, is the best player among those 3. He's on a fairly team-friendly contract when you look at his level of production relative to how much he's making, and because he only has 1 more year left on his deal after this season, he has the highest trade value of those 3. You're going to be able to get the most in a trade for DeMar, and at the same time, it wouldn't necessarily force you to rebuild because you would still have Lavine, you would still have Vucevic, who, when you look at the Bulls' on-court, off-court numbers, Vuce and Lavine actually perform much better as a duo than the big 3 do altogether. And you also wouldn't be rebuilding because, again, you can likely get some solid players and even a pick for DeMar in return from a team that is looking to make an all-in type move. Like, would the Nets try to make an all-in move for DeMar DeRozan in exchange for some of their younger players? I think so. Maybe the Sixers, or send him out west to the Warriors to try to have them win back-to-back titles after they've had a slow start to the season for some of the young players and draft picks that they have. Anyway, I like the take because there is a lot of truth to it, but yeah, it's really hot because I don't see this front office moving DeMar DeRozan and admitting defeat by bringing him in just a season ago. Next, we've got Your Range Laugh Now. Bulls should trade Coby White for Cam Reddish. Both have similar contracts, and Bulls need more shooting. I would do this trade, but not for the reasons you mentioned, because Reddish really isn't that great of a shooter, and by trading Coby, you actually lose more shooting, even if he still is an inconsistent shooter. But no, the reason I would do this trade is because if the Bulls don't have any intention on re-signing Coby White when he becomes a restricted free agent this offseason, why not take the chance on a flyer like Cam Reddish, who is a low-risk, high-reward scenario? Reddish is also going to be a restricted free agent, so you can either re-sign him to a cheap deal, or if he really just doesn't pan out, then you lose him for nothing like you would have done with Coby White anyway. But I actually think Cam Reddish would be a good fit on this team as a role player that you need as a 3-and-D type forward. He gives you some size, some versatility, especially when you already have too many guards as it is anyway. And I know he's had his struggles in the NBA, but he also hasn't really been given much of a chance since being with the Knicks after he was traded there. And he's shown some flashes where the dude has really looked great. People forget he was the number 2 overall recruit in 2018, ahead of Zion Williamson. There is still potential with this kid, especially considering he's only 23 years old. Next, we've got baked potatoes. Bulls should trade for D Rose. They're willing to let Coby White walk, so try your luck with a trade. You're getting leadership, and I think he'll be an asset off the bench. You know, I see a lot of Bulls fans, they've been saying this recently, that they want the Bulls to pursue a trade for Rose, but my main question is, how does that really elevate this team? What's the overall benefit of adding Rose other than just the feel-good story of having him come back home? And I love feel-good stories. But right now, I'm more focused on the Bulls fixing the season right now. That should be the most important thing, and trading one of your younger guards for Derrick Rose isn't one of them. Also, I don't know if anyone has been watching Rose so far this season, but he's clearly on his final years, averaging a little over 6 points per game, shooting 40% from the field, not really playing a ton, and he's making near $15 million with a team option on his deal for next season. Like, no, at that rate, I would much rather just keep Coby or trade him for something that is more valuable than bringing in a 34-year-old Derrick Rose. I love D Rose, but he's not changing anything fundamentally about this team, which is what the Bulls should be focusing on at this point. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end it there for this edition of Your Bulls Hot Takes. Keep the takes coming. I know I don't do these weekly anymore like I used to, but I'm going to try to do them at least once a month or so just because I like hearing from you guys and getting you involved in the channel. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.